3, 2, 1. Hey guys, we're live. Thank you for being with us today. Today is brought to you by Matthew Hancock, attorney at law. And in fact, there are several things I want to touch base with you guys about in this intro. Hands down, Matthew Hancock, attorney at law, is and has been my secret sauce. This man has single-handedly, him and his firm has given me the confidence to do things like this, and he's also have taken care of myself and my family in ways that I can only imagine. And Matthew, I really appreciate you for being here with us today. One of the things I want to touch base on is also Matthew Hancock has a book that I keep on display over here. It is Texas Home Cooking. It's an amazing book. It's a fantastic book. You can buy it today on Amazon. He also has a premier wine that you cannot purchase on Amazon, but I tell you, it is some of the best wine that I've had. Way better than store-bought stuff, and the reason being is because store-bought wine have the tendency to be too acidic. And I don't know if it's the way they smash the grapes, and Matthew, you can touch, you'll be able to touch on that here very shortly on how store-bought wines are different from the wine that you produce, and some of the things that people don't take in consideration what they're doing to their bodies when they divulge in store-bought wines. But going back to the real estate ordeal, Matthew is the CEO and owner of several different companies, and one of the things that he's done for me as my attorney is he's been able to help me navigate some very murky waters on some of the deals that I've been a part of. And most recently and most notably is a not to include the settled claim that we just recently resolved, but there is a real estate deal where, and I would advise all of our listeners to please pay attention to this, because this has turned out to be, it was a confusing deal at first. Yeah. But it turned out to be probably one of the most simple deals that I've ever been a part of, and maybe one of the most affordable deals that I've ever been a part of. And I'll give you guys a 50,000 feet perspective on it, and then Matthew and I are going to dive into the details of some things that we're still trying to work out. We probably provide some of the paperwork so you guys can have an understanding of what we're talking about over some of this paperwork that only Matthew was able to provide in the deal. But with no further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump right in. Matthew, thank you for being with me.
Oh man, I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much. I appreciate that fine introduction, and I'm glad to be of service to you and your family. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. You're a great guy to work with. You're easy to work with. Easy client. Easy client. Okay. You did get a good deal on your most recent real estate acquisition, however. Yeah. And I think that it doesn't close till it closes and funds. Yeah. But I think you're well on your way. Yeah, it looks that way. If they play ball with us, it looks like they will be. So what Matthew is talking about is there is a row of homes on a street that I own. I own 1, 2, 3 of the current properties on the street, and there is a neighboring property of one of the homes that I own that was owner financed by a gentleman. And for sake of confidentiality, we probably should keep the names off record, right? Or use, let's say Joe. Joe owner financed a property from Suzanne. Can we do that? I think I can keep them straight.
Okay, sounds good. Joe owner financed a property from Suzanne. Suzanne owned her house free and clear. Suzanne moved from the city, and she owner financed the property to Joe for 0% interest and only $1,000 down. Joe and the total price of the property was right at about $65,000. everything is factual about this deal other than the names of the people. Let's start with saying that, okay? Joe paid the note down. This was in 2016, correct? Joe paid the note down because it was 0% interest. Joe paid the note down to roughly about
$51,000 is owed on the note.
About $51,000 owed on the note.
It would be less, but he's behind on the note.
Okay.
And I think that really helped get you an in here.
Right.
And another thing I think we need to mention up front too is that Joe's deal was done with a contract for deed, and which is not a conventional mortgage at all, even in the owner financing world. Texas is a unique jurisdiction in that a mortgage is created with 3 different documents. Most states in the United States, they have a single document. It's called a mortgage. Everybody signs it, and everybody knows their rights and responsibilities under that contract. Texas uses a neutral third party called a trustee. They hold a deed. When the payments are all made, then they issue a release. And so there's 3 different documents that comprise that mortgage in Texas. There's a deed of trust. There's a warranty deed with the vendor's lien retained, and then there's a promissory note. Now these technicalities probably, don't mean a whole lot, except that in your standard mortgage documents in Texas, there's lots of provisions and protections for both parties that were wholly absent in this deal that you've picked up. The contract for deed that Joe and Sally had,
Susan. So what you're saying is that you're saying conventional. So basically, what he is saying is that even if you were using a bank, even if you even if you was using a bank, let's say, what's the difference between if you were using a bank and since he didn't use the bank, all these clauses that you just mentioned, those are the only differences. But
right, and in this case, the clauses we're talking about are a due on sale clause, and a clause preventing assignments of the contract. In other words, if you buy from a bank or if you use the standard mortgage documents for an owner finance deal, if you sell it, you have to pay off the existing loan, and you can't assign that contract to anybody else because there's language in the documents prohibiting that.
Okay.
And this protects the seller. They want to know who they're selling to. They want to be secure in who they're getting the payments from. But in this particular contract for deed, which was either provided by LegalZoom or written by an office supply or came from some other lawyer in a box thing that I wouldn't recommend. And it may well have been drafted by themselves. I see a lot of times old folks will use a contract for deed that they've used for the last 30 years and they don't update it, and it's worked for them for fine. A contract for deed essentially is a document that says you can purchase the house, and when you make the last payment, I'll give you a deed to the house. But in the interim, if you miss a payment, they don't have to go through the foreclosure process. They can merely go to the JP court, file an eviction, and put you out of the house. And you lose all your money and your down payment. So you don't take your equity with you. You don't build, under a contract for deed, you don't build equity in the home as you make payments. Well, you just pay the note down. And it's a kind of contract where you got to walk all the way across the bridge and make that last step before you complete it. And then you get to have the deed to your house. Now, there was a lot of exploitation of people taking place with these kinds of arrangements, where, especially in the Colonias in South Texas, a lot of Latinos and Hispanics were basically getting screwed by the landlords. They'd get almost to the last payment, and then they'd file an eviction on them.
Wow!
And say you weren't really buying this place. So it's rife for exploitation. And the Texas legislature, they took some action on that and made the contract for deed a very unappealing vehicle to use for owner finance documents. You have to provide an accounting every year. If you don't provide the accounting, there's a several $100 a day penalty that can go up to 2 years. Sometimes it's more than the purchase price or what's owed on the note. You can't use a contract for deed or even provide owner financing unless you've got a mortgage broker's license in Texas, unless you go through an attorney's office. And any attorney worth their salt will tell you don't use a contract for deed. There's too much liability. It's rife with problems. Also, the major reform was that if you pay 4 years on your contract for deed, there's no more eviction remedy. You have to foreclose just like it was a deed of trust, just like it was a standard mortgage arrangement.
Wow.
So after 4 years, your equity's protected.
Okay.
And you get to take it with you, and it's treated just like a standard mortgage. However, this particular document, and then there's consumer disclosures and a right of rescission that lasts a few days and some other consumer protections in those contracts. that are wholly absent in this particular deal. I read this one and I thought, man, I've seen that contract before. It is a bare bones deal. It is a 2-page contract for owner financing of a real estate deal. And, you know, lawyers don't do things in 2 pages.
No, no.
You know, you're talking 9 pages of mouse print. You know, anyway. This contract had the appealing feature for an investor that it was fully assignable, and that there was no prepayment penalty, and most importantly though, there was no due on sale clause.
Wow.
So So Joe, was his name Joe?
We'll call him Joe for the sake of the show.
You know, he can transfer all of his rights in the house to Matt, and not have to pay off the loan.
Yep. And
the landlord can't keep him from doing it. So you'll see how that becomes important here in a minute as Matt explains the deal a little further.
Absolutely. That's a great segue, and I appreciate it, Matthew. So that's exactly right. So what ended up happening is that I had spoken to Joe from the moment he moved in, and the reason being is because I owned the neighbor house. I owned the neighboring property to his, and I was my site's great.
That's an investment property of yours?
That isn't it. That's one of the investment properties.
So that's one of your rentals.
That's one of the rentals on the street, and I was looking at that property.
Well, you just want the house next door.
That's all I wanted. You know, I want to control the street. I want to control the entire street.
If you get 3 houses, you can get a motel.
That's the way Monopoly works, right? and that's exactly right. So when Joe moved in, I started, you know, asking him questions about, you know, did he buy the property, and he was real up forth about how he purchased the property, and I said, okay. Well, it got so to where Joe was out of state all the time, and Joe, like you mentioned, Joe fell behind on payments. And I remembered back in 2000, he bought it in 2016. In 2017, I made sure that the next time he came back in town, that I got a hold to his contact information. I was over at the property and I was doing some maintenance. I was monitoring some maintenance work that I used the home warranty, that if you watch my previous videos, you'll know about the home warranty that you should have on all of your rental properties that cover you all the way up to the street curve on any maintenance work, and that price of that home warranty to have that work done is $75, no matter what it is. It can be plumbing, it can be no matter what it is. So I made sure I got Joe's contact information. And Joe contacted me. Joe contacted me in 2018. And I kind of blew it off. It wasn't a big deal. And I was over not too long ago, and I thought about it, and I reached back out to Joe. And Joe said, let's get the deal done. And I said, Joe, what do you want? Because the note started at 65. Joe paid it down to 51. I'm thinking of nothing else. Joe wants the difference of what he's paid on that note. And Joe mentioned to me that all I want is $3,000. That's what he said. I want $3,000 and I'll assign it to you. I said, Joe, let me get off the phone with you. I'll call my attorney and he'll be reaching back out to you with paperwork. And hence Matthew Hancock reached out to us. He emailed me the contract he had with Susan. And I reached back out to Matthew and I said, Matthew, is there something in this contract that's going to prevent us from getting this deal done? And because of the way the contract was written, we can close that deal any possible way because of what Matthew mentioned. And we're going to cover it one more time so you guys understand how simple this process really is. This has opened my mind up in ways that I never could imagine. That if you just find someone who owns a property, an individual who's paid off the property, and just tell them, hey, I'll take ownership of that property and pay you a monthly payment until I pay it off if you don't charge me interest. And that's essentially what has happened. We're going to cover one more time. Matthew, could you reiterate this contract, this 2-page contract that they had? It did not have a due on sale clause, and exactly what is the difference? What regulations that banks have when you have a mortgage that prevents us from doing what we just did versus why you can't do this on a regular mortgage, the bank?
Well, under the standard deed of trust here in Texas, it contains what's known as a due on sale clause, and that means that if there's a change in equitable ownership, That's to say, if you sell the place, number one, you got to tell the bank about it, and number two, you got to pay off your loan.
Yes.
And so that's why whoever's going to buy the place, they'll go get their own financing. Then they'll pay off your loan as part of the purchase price of the house, and you get to keep what's left over, and that's the equity in the home. Now, in this case, Joe's not concerned about his equity one whit, because he feels like that he got his value by being able to live in the house.
Wow.
In other words, he has the mentality of a renter.
The mentality of a renter.
Rather than the mentality of an owner.
Wow.
But he actually, did get the value of being able to live in the home.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And he just wants money to move on. So he'll take $3,000. Now, if you give him $3,000 and he gives you the contract, because in his contract there is no due on sale clause, which means he doesn't have to pay off the remaining balance of the loan. It's hanging out there, and it transfers with the land. So if you buy Joe's interest for $3,000, you buy the house, you get the right of possession, you get the right of ownership, and you get the mortgage under the same terms.
Under the same terms, and meaning that I pick up where he leaves off.
Right.
51, not 65. 51.
And this is advantageous to the owner because she's just worried about her income stream. In other words, she doesn't miss a payment, and she starts getting her $500 a month again, which she hasn't seen in a while from Joe, because he's realized that they're not gonna kick him out for whatever reason. They let him be late. He gives them a sad story. He's probably a good talker. I've never met the guy, but I'm sure that he talked his way out of eviction on the deal. She has the right. She has the right to evict him right now, but she hasn't done that.
Yeah.
So apparently he got behind, but he's still making payments, and she needs the money. So anyway, the due on sale clause is not there. So in other words, the balance of the mortgage is not due upon the sale of the property. So the guy can sell it to you, and you don't have to pay off the existing loan.
Wow.
And then that comes into the other clause that's absent in the contract for deed in this case, which is the prohibition against assignments. In other words, if you buy a house with a mortgage from a bank, you have to be the one whose name is on that note. You can't turn around and say, okay, I'm going to sell this to my friend Tom over here, and then they pick up where you left off, step into your shoes. There's a prohibition against that assignment. You can't assign your contract to somebody else.
Wow.
Tom's got to buy it from you, trigger the due on sale clause, pay off the existing loan, get new financing. This way the banks, they can get interest on new loans. Banks make their money loaning money. So they don't want to have the same loan travel around. They want new loans.
Right. So basically what he's saying is that if it was through a bank mortgage, you have to pay that $51,000 that is remaining out there before you can assume ownership of the property, for which I will not have to do that. Now there's a couple of parts of this deal that we haven't even discussed. And one being, well, what makes this deal so attractive? Okay, well, there's still $51,000 that's owed on the property. Or you're still going to pay $500. Well, let me explain to you a couple of those at a very high level real quick. Number one, the neighboring property, which is the exact same floor plan. It's a 3-2, exact same floor plan that I own. It is rented for $1,100. So all I plan on doing, and I have a list of individuals who want to live on this street that have called me since I've leased out the previous one. All I plan on doing is taking ownership of this property, and in the very next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, turning around and renting it for $1,100, which will give me a positive cash flow of $600 every month forever until that note's paid off, for which I'll never see because tenants are going to pay off that note. I'm going to create a goose that is a golden egg.
In 8 years, in which time you'll get all the rent.
And then in 8 years, it'll be $1,100. That's one facet of the deal. Let's talk about the fucking equity.
What's the house worth?
Probably $135,000.
So what? You got $80,000 equity in the house?
You walk into these deals with $80,000 of equity in the deal already. How many 9 to 5 hours? How many 40-hour weeks, 60-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks of a tax wage job do you have to work before you can save $80,000? I didn't do this. Isn't I'm so humbled by this, and I'm so humbled by you, man.
Most people can't save that in a lifetime.
You can't save it in a lifetime. I'm so humbled by it. There's nothing special about me. I'm just riding the wave.
Yeah. Well, we didn't make the deal. You made the deal with Dan, but I mean with Joe. Sam, what's his name?
Frank, Joe for today.
You know, you've got this deal going with Joe, but the other half of the deal was we also have made a deal with Joe's note holder, Sue, the lady that actually owns, that lady that actually holds the note, that the lady that Joe's paying monthly, the one that holds that contract for deed. Matt went ahead and I believe you got a hold of her.
Correct.
And
first person
you said, hey, I've been talking to Dan. I understand he's behind.
Joe.
Man, I can't fictitious name.
All right, it doesn't seem like it matters. So Dan is the guy's name. So Dan,
we don't have his last name. So anyway, Joe, you talked to the lady and told her Joe's behind on his note, and I'd like to buy that house, and I'd like to buy the note and pick it up right where you left off at, and we sent them standard mortgage documents in Texas, a warranty deed, and the promissory note, and the deed of trust that reflect the terms of the contract for deed that Joe still owes. In other words, right where he left off, that's the numbers that are in our new mortgage documents that we sent to them. Their lawyer's going to review them, and then your deal will close. But the kicker on the deal is that if they say, "Nah, we don't want to do it,"
listen to this part. Listen to this part. It gets real good.
So let's say they don't want to play ball. She doesn't. She figures, well, I'll sell that house. Well, the problem that she's got there is that Joe's in a position to transfer his entire interest in the house because her contract doesn't prevent assignments and it doesn't have a due on sale clause. So you give Joe his $3,000 walk-in money, and he signs over his contract, his interest in that contract to you, and you step into Joe's shoes, and it's your house, and you're making the same payment, and you buy his deal, whether she likes it or not.
Wow.
So we can buy it with or without her consent.
Wow. That's super.
Because she's using bad paperwork. And there's a lot of bad paperwork out there.
That's the circle back to the beginning that I wanted to mention. There's nothing special about this deal. What Matthew just mentioned, it's the same thing he said earlier, is that this paperwork, this cheap paperwork, these owner finance deals that these folks have wrapped this paperwork in, it's not done by licensed attorney. In fact, so when Matthew emailed Joanne our paperwork, how many pages was it? Shit. I mean, theirs were 2 that she did with Dan. It was 2 pages. Ours is,
I think altogether it's like 15 pages.
15 fucking pages?
15 pages.
Like
8.5 by 11.
And there's a ton of these deals out there. There's a ton of them.
Well, the internet has given rise to a lot of do-it-yourself lawyering when it comes to transferring property and selling property. People, they Google, mortgage, and they download something from South Dakota.
Yeah.
And they put their name on it and use it, and it's not good paperwork here in Texas.
Wow.
Office supplies sell mortgage kits and owner finance documents and the contract for deed as well. And the bricks and mortar office supply, you can go in there and spend $4.95 and come out with a contract that you fill in a blank on, and it's liable to get you sued.
Yeah.
It doesn't comply with any statutes. It's a completely unregulated business. Legal forms. There's nothing that says that it's got to comport with the law at all. And so, let's say you go online to say LegalZoom. That used to be practicing law without a license in Texas, selling these legal forms and doing that online. And they lobbied the legislature here in Texas, and they did pass a law that said, Yeah, you can do that online. It's not practicing law without a license. These are high school interns in California that are filling this stuff out on the phone, and they're just filling in the blanks for you. And you know, I mean, you can you can do it, but you're not going to save any money in the long run.
Well, it's funny that you just mentioned that. Let's think about that. Those 2 pages that I had you review, we was finding all kinds of errors and just, you know, these. It seems like the people that are filling out this paperwork or even drafted have a high school education. This is not professionally written paperwork, and yet you find this kind of practice consistently.
Yeah, the paperwork was pretty sketchy. Should I tell them about some of the problems with the paperwork?
I think it's a good idea. A good idea.
Well,
sure.
I mean, number one, they had the legal description of the property wrong.
Sure did.
But they had the address right.
They had the address.
So, I mean, in Texas, to have a valid real estate contract, you can write it on the back of an Eskimo pie wrapper, and it's just all it's got to do is identify the parties, the purchase price, the date, and identify the property with specificity. And so it's got the address on there and both people's names and how much money it is, and that everybody signs it. That's a contract. You can do it on the back of a napkin. I've closed deals that were written on the back of a napkin. You know, and that's a valid contract to convey realty in Texas. And this one's just above the Eskimo pie wrapper level, but I mean it was pretty close. It was pretty close. It had a lot of liability. This seller's got a lot of exposure on it to just this sort of thing. You know, this guy can do whatever he wants to with his equity in the home and his rights of possession and his rights under the note and the whole bundle of sticks that comes with ownership of real estate.
Wow.
You know, so you're able to step into his shoes either with or without her consent. You know, and these don't come down the road every day, but there's more of them out there than you think.
Well, you know, there again, you know, I told you in 2019 that I wanted to be more specific about how I embarked on this journey of how you can turn a little into a lot. It's worth the time. It's worth the effort, because you never know. Again, you know, this is a cool segue into you know, 2019, getting the deal done, and you guys get to follow it real time. Matthew, again, I appreciate you for coming on to the show today.
I'm glad to be here, man. I'm glad. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The big button.
The big one.